Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to invite you to grab some popcorn because today we're going to be rolling the opening credits on a story that could be a Hollywood film. Well, we're going to have some fun with that. It's got everything. It's got a lead character who starts as an engineer and rises to become the COO of a Fortune 100 company. We've got a script filled with reinvention, with transformation, innovation, and a few twists and turns along the way. My guest is Sastry Durvasula, the Chief Operating Information and Digital Officer at TIAA. He oversees four interconnected pillars: technology, digital and client experience, operations, and shared services, more than half of the workforce at TIAA. These all power one of the most trusted institutions, a $1.4 trillion institution in financial services. Sastry's held big roles in other big brand companies such as McKinsey. He calls himself a recovering consultant at Marsh and American Express. But here's the so what. Sastry doesn't just lead transformation. He writes new chapters for century-old companies where he turns legacy into leverage. He's that rare executive who can see around the corner, who can communicate a vision that brings people on the journey and to drive innovation that makes a measurable difference. And that's really evidenced by more than 40 patents to his name. So settle in, again, get your popcorn. This isn't just an interview. This is going to be the next act in the leadership movie of Sastry Durvasula. So Sastry, welcome to the Tech Whispers podcast. I just shared what you do, the impressive big brand companies you've served at. And so to kick us off, I'd like to have you describe the movie called The Professional Journey of Sastry Durvasula.
If I were to title the movie, it would be most likely called From Coding to Leading, because, I've done, I started my career as an engineer, and at any given point, if I ask myself, would I ever see myself as leading the global operations, technology, and digital and shared services of a large Fortune 100 like TIAA? The answer would have been no. But I've been fortunate to have a lot of great teams and mentors that I had the opportunity to work with. The other possible title for the movie could be The 100-Year-Old, because I just love these 100-year-old firms. Most of my career I spent at the 100-year-old firms, including the one that I work at, which was founded in 1918. So reinventing these firms is my jam, and I really love it. So that would be my movie.
No, you're a big movie buff. I'd love to have you, like if you were to pick an actual movie that best captures your journey, maybe your leadership philosophy, is there one that comes to mind, Sastry?
For folks that will be listening to this that know me would immediately recognize this, because I'm a big Star Wars fan. So it's not going to be one movie, but it's the entire, series of Star Wars. So I see a lot of lessons from Star Wars and a lot of parallels with Star Wars. Obviously, I'm quite inspired by Star Wars from 1977 when the first movie came. So dating myself there. But the couple of things, right? So one is the importance of mentorship. I've been fortunate throughout my career to have great mentors that gave sage wisdom, but also constructive feedback. And I have been a mentor for a lot of folks in the industry. So like the role that Yoda plays or Obi-Wan played in Star Wars, or frankly towards the end, Luke Skywalker plays in the last trilogy. I think that's quite inspiring that, you have to learn from your mentors, but also pass your lightsaber, for your next set of leaders. The other attribute is team. Like building a team. I think if you have the right team, that has the can-do attitude, especially in these large companies, it's very difficult to drive these transformations, right? I mean, it's like, sometimes you just don't know like what you're going to run into, but with the right team, you can handle any Death Star.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just that you require that level of persistence and conviction, I think with the right team, I think anything can be done. I always look at debt that the companies carry, whether it's technical debt, data debt, process debt, experiential debt, all kinds, because, it's a big company and it's a 100-year-old company, so you have to carry some debt. And nobody actually creates debt. No, I think we always create the current systems, but then they accumulate debt. So my philosophy is today's Jedi is tomorrow's Vader. So if you don't exercise your upgrades and you don't manage the technical debt, it's going to turn into a Darth Vader on you. That's my philosophy. And then of course, learning and unlearning is important. As much as learning is important, I also believe that unlearning is equally important, especially in technology leadership roles, because we are somewhat delimited by what we know at times. So, I think unlearning is very important. And that's a famous line from Yoda. And then, of course, last piece is I love droids. I think as evident with AI now, I think, as humans could definitely use some technology, to augment our day-to-day stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Who knew in the 90s, right? Where we'd be today. And
Exactly.
gosh, we're launching this in December. I kind of wish I was launching it on Valentine's Day in honor of your start there, or May 4th.
Or May the 4th, that would be
May
ideal, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, good stuff, Sastry. You mentioned the 100-year-old companies. You've got a proven track record for transforming these century-old organizations. The work is hard, it's complex, it's risky. Why do you find that so inspiring, and why do you continue to run towards these kinds of transformations? You could go to Silicon Valley tomorrow and get a great role in a tech forward company, right?
Yeah, along my career journey, I had multiple times considered, moving into because I was offered different types of roles, definitely in Silicon Valley. Somehow I just gravitated to these 100-year-old companies. And let me tell you, actually, I'll start with TIAA itself on why I moved into TIAA's role. TIAA, if you look at it, right, it was founded in 1918 by Andrew Carnegie. And when he realized that there was, teachers didn't have a retirement plan. So he put $1 million aside. That's how TIAA started. And today we manage $1.4 trillion in assets. And we serve those who serve others, whether it's in higher ed or in healthcare or nonprofit, whether you're a doctor or a teacher or an administrator or a janitor, you have a TIAA plan. And the best part about TIAA is we make money and we return all that money back to the participants. So it's a value return to the participants, right? So I think, it's a very iconic mission in that sense. It's great, to be associated with a firm that actually stands for that mission. But it's also a 100-year-old company. So you've got all kinds of problems. You got to solve problems of yesterday, problems of today, and problems of tomorrow, all at the same time. Like on one side, I have to modernize our mainframe or create resiliency programs, in our technology infrastructure. On the other side, I have to move into cloud. And, when we started, a minor portion of our infrastructure was on cloud. Now more than half of our, infrastructure is on cloud. So you got to do that. Implement zero trust architecture on cybersecurity, and just in technology. Obviously, I have other responsibilities in my organization. But then at the same time, you got to go and take the firm into the AI era, all at the same time. So I think that's what really gets me going, frankly, the fact that you could do all these things at the same time. So it's a different, symphony, to be part of, where you have problems of yesterday, problems of today, and problems of tomorrow, all at the same time. And at the end, you look back into the mission. Today, for instance, 45% of American households don't have enough to retire. It's an astonishingly big number. So it is, we call it the retirement crisis. And I feel like anything we do and my team does in technology or operations or our digital client experience or shared services, all four legs of my organization, ultimately is impacting that mission. I think that's what really gets me going. Obviously, I can speak to my prior firms as well in a similar context. They have different missions and different purposes, but point is, I think solving those problems of yesterday, today, and tomorrow in these iconic firms that have actually stood the test of time. I think that's what's like 2/3 of the history of TIAA was made when there was no internet.
Mm,
Most of these 100-year-old firms, I mean, you can say that for any 100-year-old company, right? A
yeah,
minor portion of the history was actually made when there was no electricity in the world. So how cool is that to think about, wow, we're writing the history of a firm for the next century. I think that's what really, that's my jam at this point. Yeah.
I get it. And you're just so good at it. And 1.4 trillion. That's a lot of zeros, man. That's impressive. These movies, these great movies Shastry has, they all have this turning point in the movie, right? And so, applying that to these big transformations of large century-old companies, is there a moment? Is there an indicator? Is there when do you know we've made that turn, that we're on the right path?
Yeah, it's hard to say when you actually made the turn, but I do go back to my problems of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. That's kind of like my general test of the impact. When you see the progress on all three fronts in a meaningful way, that's when I feel like we've turned the tide. Because what happens then, I mean, it's very easy to kind of get carried away by the latest and greatest. Like of course, in the current situation, anything that smells like AI or that has AI, is the talk of the town. And yes, everybody's working on it. So are we, and we are making impact. But can you say that the company is transforming because we've done X, Y, and Z with AI? I don't think so. I think we have to solve what I characterize as the boring problems, like paying off the technical debt or data debt or some of the foundational issues, process reengineering. So I believe that, as a leader, I feel that when I've seen enough progress on all three fronts, problems of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, is when I feel that, okay, we've turned the corner, and then we go to the next phase. So in my case, obviously, I'm coming up on my 4th year anniversary. I think we have turned the corner on a lot of these problems of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But now I feel like, okay, the world has changed all of a sudden with AI. So now what's the next chapter? How does the next phase look like, for the next 3 to 5 years? Yeah.
Well, part of this is just personally being able to continue to, as you said earlier, the unlearning and the reinventing, and to continue to be adaptive. And so I've got 6 special mystery questioners for you today. And I want to tee up the first one right now. Somebody who knows you well, knows your superpowers, has been with you in the trenches, and he himself is an amazing transformer. So listen into this first question. When we come back, tell us who it is, maybe share maybe a little bit of a memory about this individual, and I know you'll have fun with the question. So listen in.
Your superpower is the ability to reinvent yourself. People reinvent themselves over a decade, maybe a couple of decades. You pretty much do it on a weekly and a daily basis. The ability to bridge the old to the new, the ability to connect the dots, the ability to articulate the art of the possible, the ability to communicate that to your audience, forces you to reinvent on a daily basis, but you have that innate ability to do it. How do you do it?
Wow, that's powerful.
Satish.
Yeah.
That's Satish Muthukrishnan, who is the global CIO of Ally Financial. I had the pleasure to work with you, Satish, obviously, for a long time in my American Express days. I have fond memories of not only working with Satish, but going on hikes onto the Piastowa Peak with Satish. I still have actually a little video clip where my younger one, who was probably like 4 years old back then, or 5 maybe, holding a BlackBerry phone, pretending to be me on a call with Satish. So I have some great memories. Thank you for the question, Satish. I think, inventions are great. And obviously inventions are the reason why we are who we are as humans. Reinventions are tough though. So, it's one quote that stayed with me for a long time. And I'm sure Satish heard this from me many times, is from by Bill Gates. It goes something like this: we always overestimate the change that's going to happen in the next 2 years, and underestimate the change that's going to happen in the next 10 years. So, especially with technologies, right? So, if you look back to any mainstream technology that we have, be it the internet or mobile or social media or now AI, hopefully, um, we always overestimated the change that's going to happen, when we were working in the middle of it. And then now you look back and, you know, the impact of it is so profound, right? It's basically changed the world completely, right? So I'm a student of history in that sense. So I try to keep my telescope and microscope on things. So while, of course, we are all working on critical things for the firms that we work at and for the functions I have, my teams have, I try to keep the telescope out and see, like, okay, what would the future, like, what is the hypothesis here? Where could we be landing? And then work backwards. So and I'm a storyteller, so I try to like bring that like stories into the day-to-day conversations. For instance, I always talk about the BlackBerry story. Like, and not just the BlackBerry history and all that. Of course, we all celebrated that in so many ways, in so many strategic conversations. But in 2007, when the iPhone came in June, BlackBerry that year closed, like, their revenues were like $3 billion. And by 2011, they went from $3 billion to close to $20 billion. And what happened in 2007 in December? The recession happened. So if you sit in BlackBerry's shoes, you're like, iPhone came, recession happened, we went from $3 billion to $20 billion. We still are like, everybody holds our phone, and it's very easy to get lulled into inaction. And that's what happened, right? And then literally 5 years later, the company just basically collapsed, right? So you can say the same thing about AOL. And probably we'll see that unfolding for some of the leading AI companies today, becoming tomorrow's AOLs and Yahoos, right? Like, they're like the banner owners, but they may or may not survive the test of this reinvention that has to happen. So I think kind of having that context in mind helps a lot, because sometimes we are over infatuated by the stuff that we work on, but we lose sight of, the reinvention part. So that's what really gets me up. Obviously I had the pleasure to reinvent many things with Satish in my past. So I appreciate the question. And I think it's so powerful to kind of think about things that, we build, my teams built, that we actually had to decommission and move on, right? So, I personally decommissioned the programs I wrote when I was an engineer. Like, it's like, so that's what is needed, I think, as a technology leader: constant reinvention. And frankly, especially when you're helping change the company with the power of tech and AI and evangelize it, that storytelling aspect, motivating the teams to kind of wake up to that cause and lose sleep on that, and have that level of insecurity in a way that, technology is here to change tomorrow. So what we've considered as point of arrival is tomorrow's point of departure. I think that's an important attribute in tech leadership roles.
Yeah, I like that. And Satish, thanks so much. Always inspired by him. Always learned from him. He was my guest on episode 50, so I think it was middle of 2024, and we actually did an episode with his CISO, Donna Hart, which was really cool to have them together.
Fantastic, yeah, it's great, yeah.
So let's keep that Sastry playbook open, and I've got another mystery questioner who's going to kind of help us understand how you approach these big transformations. So very astute question. So listen into this one.
Sastry, when you take on a transformation of the scale you are leading at TIAA, what is the mindset shift you expect from your leaders that most determines whether they will rise with the change or get left behind? And how do you help them make that shift?
Who's that?
That's Eileen Lash. She's my chief administrative officer. She goes by the nickname Eyelash. Uh, Thank you, Eileen, for the question. She's been with me. And by the way, she's also a fellow Star Wars aficionado. So the Force is with us. So, no, I think it's a great question. You know, um, every firm and every transformation program, and I'm not the first one to explain this, but like it has like three categories of folks that it has to deal with, right? Like, folks that will say, this is great, fantastic, I'm all in. Just take AI as an example. I'm all in. This is the future. They're engaged, they're learning, upskilling, and all that stuff. Then there is the 1/3 that are super pessimistic about it. Most likely carry the attitude that we've seen this movie before. We'll time it out, we'll wait it out. This shall pass. And then there is the middle that's like trying to figure out, like, especially at the leadership layer, every leader has to encounter these three camps of folks in a firm. And I believe that all three are essential. All three are essential for any transformation, because you can't just have like the Kool-Aid camp and only the Kool-Aid camp, because sometimes we get overly blindsided if you're overly infatuated by the problem you're trying to solve. So I think having that balance is very critical. And frankly, the middle side is equally critical, because they're the ones who actually are going to decide whether this transformation is going to really make it or not. So I look for a few dimensions in all of these colleagues and teams and leaders, Dan. The 3 L's is what I always subscribe to. So one is listening. I think listening is the most underrated aspect of communication. So regardless of where their belief system is, I look for leaders and team members in their ability to listen, because the trends from the industry are where our clients are, where our customers are, where are they spending their time these days, the colleagues. Do you fundamentally have that willingness to listen to that? I think that's one. A second thing is learning. Regardless of which side you are on any, I have like the utopian and dystopian believers in my own team on AI, for instance, right? So, and I'm actually quite happy about it that I have both camps. In fact, my wife and I have this debate all the time at home. Like, I tend to take the utopian view and she takes the dystopian view on AI. And that's fascinating. And my kids are like in the middle, like trying to figure out, okay, what do they want from mom and dad today? And then so that they can go one way or the other. But it's fascinating, right? And we need all three. And I think that learning aspect is so critical. Are you willing to learn, regardless of your belief system? And then the third piece is leading with authenticity. Like, are you willing to lead through this? So I think, I've been fortunate to have teams that had this heterogeneous, texture to them, especially in these 100-year-old firms. And I have seen folks moving from one side to the other completely. And that's great to watch. The belief system changes absolutely from right to left or left to right. And it's fascinating to watch. But I believe that the things that actually are going to really define the success of a transformation are the three that I fundamentally believe in: listening and learning and leading with authenticity.
Powerful. Yeah, I like that. And thank you, Eyelash. I'm a little...
Thank you, Eileen.
It's a little strange to say that, but that's your nickname. So I love it.
She's not going to like that I call her Eyelash on a podcast, but hey.
Well, and there's, I won't give last names, but there might be someone on the team named Alex who might have helped me with getting some of these great mystery questioners. So big shout out to him and a big thank you to him for
Thank
that.
you, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that innovation is one thing, reinvention is another thing. Okay. And so I guess for context, change, right? So change is accelerating, it's taking place. But one theme I've noticed about the great transformers like you, like Shobi, my last guest, is identifying those things that shouldn't change, that don't change. Can you speak to that in terms of how because otherwise we're just changing everything and there's just it's all quicksand, right?
One thing that, like if you think about like the 3 Ps, like obviously, I'm a consultant in rehab, so I always try to think of these threes, which you will hear a lot of threes from me today. Platforms, processes, and people, right? So, as a technologist and a technology leader in the industry for a long time, platforms have changed. They changed multiple times. Processes have been re-engineered. I think people remains a constant. I do think that fundamentals of like people leadership and how you engage people, how you motivate people, and how you bring them along, how you manage through the change, despite the change attributes, whatever the change could be. It could be the pandemic, it could be the internet, it could be AI, it could be quantum plus AI in the future. I do think that the fundamentals of people and that situational leadership aspects of managing people, I think it's a constant. I think really caring for that people side is probably the most important thing. And as one of my mentors said to me a long time ago, at the end, all 3 Ps are people, people, people. So that's one. Culture is the other one. I think especially in these 100-year-old firms that stand for a specific mission or purpose, they have a defined culture. Now, when you come into this, and I obviously transitioned multiple roles and leadership, culture add is great. So I think that's kind of how I look at it. But there is a fundamental culture that will either make or break the change, right? So culture eats strategy for lunch or dinner. So I think having that mindset on culture and making sure that, culture is a critical pillar of the strategy and transformation and change is very important. And I think, integrity and values are the non-negotiables because, sometimes it's very easy to be lured into taking an action that gives you the short-term dividends. But if they're not the right principle-based decisions, then you really have to question those decisions because these companies have stood the time test for 100 years because they have held on to those core principles. So I think that's the other thing, I would emphasize that, fundamental values never change, in leadership or just company culture.
Yeah, really good. I've got a string of mystery questions here that I'm really looking forward to your response.
I'm loving these mystery questions.
Oh, these are so fun, and it's just these are people that were just excited to do this, and they think a lot of you. So, I always find it interesting how people like yourself, how you make decisions in these times, right? Things are moving so fast. The complexity, things. We haven't seen a lot of this before, so. Listen to this special mystery questioner, a good friend of both of ours, and you're going to love the question. So check it out.
Sastry, for all the data and planning in the world, some decisions still feel like a leap into the unknown. When you find yourself at one of those crossroads with no clear answer, what inner compass do you turn to, and how do you personally navigate the fog of uncertainty?
That's Neil Sapple.
That is. Yeah,
oh my God.
You knew right away, didn't you?
Wow. Blast from the past. I still remember the day Neil brought cronuts to one of our leadership meetings. He was my colleague and he brought this. And I back then I did not know what cronuts were. And They're basically a fusion of croissants and donuts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I love Neil. Thank you, Neil. This question, his voice actually brought me my cronut memories back. So I think the fog of uncertainty, right, in his question, I think it's a very important part of the question. Let me just maybe take you back to like maybe a little bit about my upbringing, just for a few seconds.
Good. Yeah.
So, I'm the oldest son in my family, and I have two younger brothers with three siblings. And when I was 14, my dad passed away. So my mom was a single mom since then, and she wasn't in the workforce, so she had to go back to work. And she brought us up, and the youngest brother was 8 years old. So, so I guess my life started, at least in that sense, from the rock bottom. Like with no major guide to look into. So for me, everything is my mom, essentially. All the decisions I made in my life, my mom has been and continues to be my inspiration. So what happens is that's my fallback, right? Like in when it comes to these uncertainty and these decisions one has to make, like, do I have all the data? Most times as leaders, we don't have the data. Just like the uncertainty I had to kind of go through in my own personal life. At many times the decisions I made in my own life or career, it was mostly conviction than clarity. Right. So, and so with time, of course, you tend to develop that pattern recognition on where, clarity is at most important, and where you could lead with conviction, and lean into your own pattern recognition, your own value system, and your own people that have more expertise in this space than you do as a leader, and kind of leverage that to make these decisions. So that's kind of like how I think about decision making. I would love all the facts, but to Neil's question, as leaders, we just don't have the luxury of all the facts, and striving for perfection and getting all the data basically means that we're gonna miss the boat. And as somebody said, the worst decision one could make is not making the decision itself, right? So that's the school I come up into. If I think about like the current example of AI, right? So obviously, there's no crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. We all know that it's changing the world, and there is so much uncertainty. There is so much hype. There is talk about, a big bubble in the making. There's a lot of sizzle, less steak. So how do you make decisions? How do you invest in this? Especially, when you're working with the, retirement investments of, people who serve others. It's a very, delicate balance that one has to exercise, right? So I have a hypothesis. I call this the 80-20 hypothesis, that 80% of the jobs will change at least 20% by AI, and 20% of the jobs will change as much as 80% by AI. So that's my little kind of leading in, hypothesis, right? So like, okay, with that hypothesis, of course, I gather facts, but the decisions that we make as a team are driven by a level of conviction, and this hypothesis has like a guiding post that, okay, if we believe this, then would we change this, and what would success look like, and then work backwards. And of course, iterate through the decisions execution as things kind of surface. So that's my philosophy on decision making, especially when you have to deal with the fog of uncertainty, which I had to deal with many times in both in personal life and then in my professional life.
Really helpful, just to know how you think about that, how you approach that. Neil talked about how at American Express, how you'd negotiate and debate both sides of an issue, like that, just to force that muscle.
Yeah, we always had the red team approach, and Neil was fantastic, actually. But in fact, when Neil came into American Express, we were at the crossroads of many challenges and changes, and he was a big advocate for change, but he was also quite balanced in the way he approached change and collaborated with others. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Neil. He was actually in India when I asked him to do the question, and he, there's no downtime when you're traveling through India, but he made time because it was
Yeah.
important to him. And
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
When I rebranded the podcast back in May of 2022, it used to be the CIO Whisperer, but your jobs have gotten so big, I rebranded the Tech Whisperers. And so Neil was the first guest when we rebranded, and just such a great friend. And as we always like to kid each other, I always say to him, if you need anything, the answer is yes. And so
That's fantastic. Yeah.
He's the same way in return. It's funny you mentioned, you just used the example, decision-making in an AI world. So this next mystery questioner might know a thing or two about that. So let's check out her question, and you're going to know who this is right away.
One of the things I've admired about your leadership style, Sastry, is how you make people at all levels feel heard and valued. How do you balance setting clear direction while still making team members feel like they have ownership and a voice? What does inclusive leadership actually look like for you in practice?
Dr. Singh. So that's Swati Singh. Thank you, Swati, for the question. Obviously, I've had the privilege to work with Swati during my Amex days, and she's our head of data and AI and our corporate technology. She's a CIO on my leadership team here at TIAA. Continues to be a pleasure to work with Swati. Obviously, Swati has seen me in action, in two big companies that we had the chance to work at. So, inclusive leadership, I believe that, kind of piggybacking on my previous, like listening and learning and leading with authenticity, I believe that listening is still an important attribute for inclusive leaders, because what happens is, especially if you're in a progressive career path, like I had at Amex, where I was able to connect with people at every level, right? Because kind of growing up, so I had somewhat of a luxury of like having different antennas, listening posts in the organization, because I grew up with them, and I became the leader and leader of leaders, but I still had those relationships built. Because I invested in them, and actually I grew up with those relationships, right? But so it's one thing to do that in a company where you had a progressive career. It's very hard to do when you don't have that luxury. Like after American Express, every role that I took is basically a C-suite role, and so you just don't have those relationships built in. And so coming into TIAA, I didn't know anyone here. So you basically have to now establish relationships with the board, with the C-suite, with your direct reports, with the direct reports of other C-suite members. Basically, in that process, a year would be gone, right? So you have to have like different mechanisms that are kind of forcing me essentially to have those skip-level conversations, different listening posts at different levels of the organization, whether it's coffee chats or bring your bagels, whatever the instruments are. But I think that's very important. That's one aspect. I do think that inclusive leadership also comes with clear accountability structure. And I often joke, and I'm sure Swati has heard it many times, who's the single throat to hug here for this? Like, do you have that accountability structure in the organization? Because it's extremely important, to have that level of accountability. Because what happens is when you give accountability to leaders or folks in the organization, it gives them the empowerment. And with great power comes great responsibility, right? So they actually feel that they're solving the bigger problem. So the accountability structure helps, but it also helps because in matrix structures, it's very hard to see who is ultimately the deciding leader here for a specific thing. And sometimes it's multiple people, but that accountability is so important. And I do believe that inclusive leadership needs to exercise that accountability structure, especially in these large transformation programs, when you have to lead across the enterprise. Like, who's the accountable party? It doesn't have to be in your organization. It's somewhere in the enterprise, but it's identified accountable leader. And then the last piece, I believe, is being transparent. I do think that, especially in feedback, because it's very difficult to give honest, truthful, brutal feedback to people. And it's just like we don't want to we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? So that's naturally like how people are built. So in leadership roles, I believe that to be inclusive, one has to be very bold and courageous to build that level of relationship capital where you can give that honest, brutal feedback to people and also receive it from people, because that's what feedback is, a gift. So you got to give that gift, obviously, in the right way. But the more you do that, it's a gift that actually keeps on giving. You get feedback, you provide feedback, and you learn through tough times, and it cements the relationships in a different level. And that's why I have still people that I worked with in the past that I get to kind of continue the conversation, even though they don't work at TIAA, for instance, because we have that relationship in terms of having a transparent relationship where, we share how we feel about, each other's leadership or each other's strengths and opportunities. So being that transparent, I think, is very important. Inclusiveness, to me at least, doesn't mean just you bring people along all the time. I think it's being transparent with them, being, holding people accountable, at the same time having the listening posts in the organization.
Yeah, seeing how these all tie together, Sastry. And thank you, Dr. Swati. That was a great question. And
thank you, Swati.
Yeah, really, really good. You mentioned earlier a mentor talked about the 3 Ps, which were people, people, and people. So I know that's a big part of your story. And this next mystery question is going to get into what I think is a very powerful tool, a very practical tool that you can use to live out that. So listen to this question, and again, you're going to know who this is right away, and I can't wait to hear you tell the story.
Hey, Sastry. One thing that I admired about our time working together is the concept of Sastry's file. You always had the way of bringing people's developmental opportunity during our performance conversations. And it goes something like, I love this person X, but, and then there is a actionable developmental opportunity. Amazingly, you remembered everybody's developmental opportunity. You always brought it back in every performance conversation, including the progress they made. In hindsight, that turned out to be a very powerful tool for me as I continued to grow in my career. So help the audience to understand how each of us could develop our own version of Sastry's file.
That's Yogs.
That's Yogs. Yeah. Thank you, Yogs.
Yeah. Thanks, Yogs. Yogaraj Jayaprakasam. So he's with Deluxe now. And Yogs and I've worked with Yogs at American Express as well. This is like the Amex family, essentially. We're like in every company these days. It's great. Thank you, Yogs, for the question. I still remember it brought me memories of the conference room. He and I used to be in these calibration sessions in Phoenix, Desert Ridge campus. Listen, I think, first of all, you don't want to have a file on people, okay, just to be very clear. But I have a belief system that actually stems from the learnings that I had from American Express. Amex spends a lot of time on people leadership, all the way from situational leadership models and great programs for accelerated development of leaders that I was fortunate to be part of. So there's a lot of emphasis on people leadership at Amex, and you'll see that from any leader that's manufactured from the Amex shop, right? In that sense. I believe that performance management and talent management are 2 distinct disciplines. They're related, but they're very different. So what happens is when you have a performance management conversation, you're focused on like the what and the how, the contributions for that year, and then you you do performance management and ratings, whatever the schematic is for a company, right? But talent management is a continuum. And it's a powerful continuum to have. And so the file construct that Yogesh mentioned is coming from the talent side of the house for me. Like I remember we used to call this the one key question in talent management at AMX. And I actually use this in pretty much every company that I worked at. I'm a biggest advocate. Even at TIAA, I'm like, what's the one key question for this leader? What's my one key question to Shonda? Right. So I asked my boss about it. So who's the CEO of the firm. So I believe that this continuum of talent conversation is so critical. I will tell you this, Dan. One of my mentors is Ash Gupta. Ash Gupta was the chief risk officer for American Express, iconic leader in our space. And he used to do these handwritten notes. And I actually have one of many notes, but from Ash, one of them I laminated it, and it's in my file cabinet. Speaking of file cabinets here, like many years ago, maybe 15, 18 years ago, he wrote Sastry's strengths, opportunities, and he wrote like clear text, very direct feedback, and like in a one key question construct. So I kept it and I laminated it and I keep sending it to him once in a while, on his birthday. Hey, Ash, happy birthday. By the way, this is your gift to me. So I believe that having that continuum on talent, whether it's for strengths or to like maximize one's potential, and the investment you make in like developing people and leaders, and being that transparent and direct in those conversations, and bringing it, in these conversations from a talent side. Even if it's a performance conversation, I always would, like, as you said, I would bring up this conversation, like even though it doesn't have anything to do with that year's performance. I think it's so important, and I've been fortunate to have leaders who invested in me, and I try to give back to to the community in that sense. So that's why I keep, like, even today, I have a one key question for Yogesh, and I'm sure he has one for me too. It's just it's a fascinating framework to think about talent, from my own prior experiences at Amex. Yeah.
Thank you, Yogesh. I'm really glad you asked that question, and just so many teachings in there. And the underlying all this is you care, right? You care about the people, and so. But you just mentioned made a reference to your CEO, your boss. So talk about that partnership, the importance of that partnership today in driving these big, hard transformations.
Yeah, I mean, Tashonda is a force, right? So she's the reason why I joined TIAA. And she has a very similar set of backgrounds, experiences, and principles. And she's fundamentally wired to make a difference in the communities that we work with. So, it's an inspiring leader that I get to work with every day, which is fantastic. I learn a lot from her, and we have a great relationship and a fantastic partnership. And she invests in my team. Obviously, I have the privilege to lead more than half of the workforce in TIAA in my capacity of operating officer, information officer, and digital officer. So the one thing that she and I share is the common passion for like the future of TIAA, right? So, and we fundamentally believe, and that's why I have these innovation sessions with my team and her, and we call them the T-Jam sessions. So jam sessions with Tashonda. And she actually, she puts her product manager hat on in these sessions, and then we just ideate, and that's how we filed a few patents actually with T. Tashonda goes by T, and with T. And one of those patents actually just got granted. So, we share the same passion on, leveraging AI. For instance, one of the problems we're trying to fundamentally solve then is, with longevity, which is on the rise, which is great. So we have more retired participants in our base, which is fantastic, and they're availing the lifetime income from TIAA. But we also know that older adults are more susceptible to cognitive decline, and which makes them more vulnerable for financial fraud. Whether it's financial fraud, like, impersonation scams like IT support or IRS, or romance scams, or just plain cybersecurity scams. So that's one area where we are investing quite a bit. And we fundamentally believe that AI's cognitive capabilities could very well supplement and help in these areas, where we have to protect the financial security of retired participants. So a lot of innovation happening. We've done some thorough research and published a study through our TIAA Institute here. So, I mean, it's fantastic to have, Tashanda as my boss, and the great set of, C-suite peers, and a board that is actually quite diverse as well, for the mission that we have. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. This works too hard today. We've got to have the CEO leading the way is with us. So that's really good. I've got one last mystery question I've saved to the end. And it's just one more of the superpowers I want to unpack of your story, of your movie, Sastry. So listen in.
Sastry, I've heard that one of your superpowers is that throughout your career, you have found a way to make every customer or stakeholder feel like they're your only customer. How have you been able to create that perception, even though you've obviously had to spread your time across a much larger group of customers?
Yeah, that's Tom Brutus, our CTO. It's a great question, because almost in every technology leader's career, or an operating officer role like mine, you have many customers and stakeholders that you have to work with, right? Internally and externally. I have to have, I'm the executive sponsor for some of our clients, our plan sponsor clients. Obviously, we have my client experience and client services teams deal with participants, like individual millions of customers. Then we have internal stakeholders, and it's almost like you have to operate like Unix. Like it's a timeshare in that sense, but it's like it's always dedicated. You feel like the operating system is fully dedicated for you, but you're actually catering to many demands. I do believe that building that relationship capital early on is extremely critical, because what happens, and now that I've done it a few times, I can speak to this from my own experience. Like coming into a firm like TIAA, early on, how much time are you investing in like reaching out to people? At McKinsey actually is a fabulous company to like learn from, by the way. My years at McKinsey taught me a lot. Yeah, in fact, in retrospect, I could almost extrapolate the learnings that I had from McKinsey to my careers even before McKinsey. They always say, tell me 5 people. And so everybody, like when I joined as a partner, my buddy partner basically said, these are the 5 people that you should talk to, and ask them for 5 people from each. So what happens is, like, you reach out to 5 people. So Dan is one of my people, let's say, and I go to Dan and I say, Dan, pleasure to meet you one-on-one. Dan, can you give me 5 people that I should be talking to? So the next thing you know is you basically have like a lot of people that you're connecting with early on, with different disciplines. And I think building that relationship capital early on with folks, I think, is extremely important in these large companies, because they're so big and it's easy to get lost. But what happens is when you actually try to get into some issue that you're solving for, and you remember, wait a second, I spoke to Melissa the other day, and she might have an answer on this. And you pick up the phone and call Melissa. And then who knows, Melissa may have an answer, or Melissa may connect you to Tom, so it's like the world kind of works, in its own unique way. So I do think that having that relationship capital early on is very critical with these stakeholders, because what happens then is they know that, you're a busy guy, you have a lot of responsibilities, but that you have their best interests in mind, that you will do your level best to, resolve or, execute or deliver or innovate, whatever, you have that you're going on with that stakeholder. So I think having that relationship capital built and then renewing that relationship capital, I think is at least what I feel as the secret sauce in managing these multiple stakeholders in a large company.
I love the intentionality of it. It doesn't happen by accident, right? You got to put some time in.
Exactly. I mean, it cannot be transactional just because you happen to be working on it. And that's where I think I really like this McKinsey concept of get your 5 people and then ask them to give 5 more people, like each. Yeah.
I've got one more question for you. It's the question around the scholarship, the Tech for Good scholarship, and we're at that point. We've hit $500,000 in commitments to these STEM nonprofits, Sastry. So it's just such a joy to be able to do this. And I know that you and TIAA are very involved in the communities that you're in and that you serve. And so I just wondering, is there a STEM nonprofit that comes to mind that you'd like to recognize and who'll benefit from? Basically, it's our 9-month TechLX leadership program.
I mean, that's great, Dan. First of all, thank you for extending it, as an opportunity in this conversation. I'm the executive champion for our Achieve Business Resource Group, which is basically our employee network for all women colleagues globally at TIAA. So I'm a proud sponsor and champion for this. Obviously, you heard my own personal story, and my mom continues to be my inspiration. So I'm inspired to be the champion for Achieve. And through Achieve, we are investing quite a bit in, we call Achieve in AI. And there's a lot of leaders within our Achieve ecosystem that could really benefit from, a leadership opportunity like this. So I would like to extend it to one of our Achieve leads, as part of this. So I will definitely, send you the name, after this. Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like an amazing organization. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for the story of your mom and those times. And in a Sastry, I kind of want to put a bow on this, but I was just thinking about the Sastry movie, right? And every great movie ends with has a great line in it, right? So what's your line going to be from your movie that's people going to remember from your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to just shamelessly use Yoda's line for this, which is do or do not, there is no try. I believe that, going back to my engineer roots and humble beginnings in life, I believe that there is no such thing as try. You just have to do it and be bold enough to deal with the implications. As long as you keep trying to do positive stuff and good for the world, I think the world will give back in its own unique ways. So I believe that, nothing compensates, for doing. I think, do or do not, there's no try, I guess, would be my line. Yeah.
Well, I think mine for you would be the future isn't a destination, it's something we build together. How's that?
That's fantastic.
That fit all right too?
Always in motion. Always in motion. The future is.
Always in motion. Well, that is the perfect final scene for this movie we call the Tech Whispers podcast. And I know your story's still being written, but man, it's what a great story you've written so far. And thanks for being such a good sport. I know I just badgered you for a long time, but really your story of reinvention and being able to see around the corners and bringing others along, the whole people focus. And, for you, legacy is really what you leave behind in people, which is so, so special. And the historian, you gave me a whole new perspective on the value of the historian. So Sastry, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and opening up your heart and your story, your personal story, and helping us be better leaders, in this world today. But thank you so much. What a great pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. It's an immense pleasure to be with you, and I continue to enjoy our conversations, on and off, this recording. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Everyone, be well. We will see you next time. And thank you again to Sastry and his amazing team.